The next item of business is consideration of Business Motion 18001 in the name of Jamie Hepburn on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau on changes to business. Any member who wishes to speak to the motion should press their request to speak button now. And I call on Jamie Hepburn to move the motion.
Move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you. And I...
The inclusion of a ministerial statement on the Alexander Dennis situation in my Central Scotland constituency. But can I also make a plea to the Minister, through you, Presiding Officer, to include an early ministerial statement on the 2 documents that were released this morning, responding to behaviour in schools guidance and violence, aggression and dangerous behaviour risk assessment guidance. There has been regular discussion in the Chamber and elsewhere in Parliament about the issue of school violence, classroom disruption and pupil-on-staff aggression. It is a regular feature of our debates and questions. The Cabinet Secretary for Education and Skills had promised to deliver these documents. They have now been published, and I welcome that. But I think it is vitally important that we as parliamentarians have an adequate opportunity before recess to properly scrutinise the Cabinet Secretary and other ministers in respect to the contents of these 2 documents. And so I'd like to ask the Minister for Parliamentary Business to consider this additional request on my part and on the part of many others, I'm sure, so that we have an adequate opportunity to respond in a timely way to these important publications.
Minister.
President Officer, I would suggest to Mr Cairn, would urge he and all the colleagues he has in his party to maybe think through the internal dialogue that they have as a group, because we've already received such a request from their business manager, and of course that's been considered in the usual way.
Thank you. Point of order, Stephen Kerr.
Just, Presiding Officer, just to seek your clarity, in responding to the motion, I didn't mention that. Of course I'm aware of this dialogue, but I'm also aware of the fact that the Minister for Parliamentary Business was not able in the Bureau meeting to give a firm commitment that we would have the opportunity to scrutinise these publications earlier on today, and that is why I didn't reference it. Of course I'm aware that there is an internal dialogue, and ask the Minister to bear those discussions and my comments now, and a letter that I have written to him directly this morning as he decides how we will use parliamentary time before recess.
Thank you, Mr Kerr. Both of those points are on the record, while the latter was not a point of order. We will move to the question on the motion. The question is that motion 18001 be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. The motion is therefore agreed. The next item of business is topical questions, and at question number 1 I call Jackie Bailey.
To ask the Scottish Government what action is being taken to reduce ambulance turnaround times at hospitals in light of figures showing that so far in 2025 more than half of conveyances recorded a turnaround time of longer than 45 minutes.
Cabinet Secretary Neil Gray.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Improving access to urgent care services is a key priority for the Scottish Government. On the 31st of March 2025, we published the NHS Scotland Operational Improvement Plan, which sets out how we plan to improve access to treatment, including within urgent care settings. The plan includes an additional £200 million as part of the wider £21.7 billion investment in health and social care services to reduce waiting times, improve patient flow through hospital, which will lead to a reduction in ambulance turnaround times, and to reduce delayed discharges. We are supporting boards to strengthen examples such as flow navigation centres, so that they are able to refer patients to more services and avoid unnecessary conveyance to hospital in an ambulance.
Jackie Bailey.
And I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his response. I'm sure he'll agree with me that paramedics do a wonderful job, but they simply cannot cope with the scale of the challenge. This is, of course, the 5th recovery plan in the last 4 years, and none of them have worked so far. In Aberdeen, an ambulance waited more than 15 hours outside the hospital. In Ayrshire and Arran, it was 15 hours. In Glasgow, it was nearly 10 hours outside the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. all because A&E is bursting at the seams. Does he agree that this is simply not acceptable, and will he set a maximum time by which ambulance patients must be admitted to the hospital rather than queuing outside?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you. There are a number of points that I do agree with Jackie Bailey on in her question. The first point around the incredible work that our Scottish Ambulance Service staff does is well recognised by me, and my gratitude to them for the incredible lengths that they go to serve the people that we also seek to serve is remarkable. The point that she made around accident emergency bursting, it seems actually what we're seeing is the pressure in the whole system contributing to pressures in particular parts. The ambulance service and turnaround times is one, which is why the operational improvement plan is not just focused on one area, it is focused in on social care, in general practice and primary care, in addressing delayed discharge, on providing additional capacity through frailty services adjacent to accident emergency, as well as providing additional capacity to reduce delayed discharge, on which we are seeing progress happen. But I also agree with her. The progress is happening, on which I do agree with her that any undue delay for people to be able to access services is unacceptable, and why we're taking the concerted effort that we are in order to reduce the pressures that we're seeing across the system.
Jackie Bailey.
Cabinet Secretary should tell that to the almost 2,000 people stuck in a hospital as delayed discharge. But not only are ambulances unable to attend calls, doctors can't get jobs despite record-high waiting lists for treatment. The Royal College of Psychiatrists is reporting a £240 million shortfall in the face of a mental health emergency. The SNP have been in power for 18 years now. They've presided over this crisis. And, Presiding Officer, if they had an idea of how to fix it, surely we would have seen it by now.
Cabinet Secretary.
In relation to how this impacts upon the ambulance turnaround times that we're seeing, of course, the investments that we're making in all the aspects that Jackie Bailey speaks to, including seeing delayed discharge reduced substantially from the 2,000 figure that she quotes, which was at the peak around Christmas time. It is below that position now. But of course we need to support our general practitioners. We need to support our wider system. That is the very point that I was making, to support our ambulance service to respond. But of course the performance of our ambulance service is robust in terms of our response times that we are seeing from ambulance service colleagues. We are seeing the median purple incident response times at 6 minutes and 45 seconds. We are seeing an improvement in that picture. So I will absolutely do everything that I can to make sure the whole system responds, to make the pressure upon our ambulance service lessened for exactly the reasons that Jackie Bailey sets out.
Willie Rennie.
I received regular reports of ambulances queued for a long time outside Victoria Hospital in Kirkcaldy, and whilst the government wasted endless amounts of time and energy on the centralisation of the care service, they neglected the reform that the actual sector was requiring, because that's where the central problem is we don't have the flow through the hospital into social care. So where is the brand new plan to sort out social care in Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
I've already referenced a significant amount of intervention that the Operational Improvement Plan that was published earlier this year will address some of the concerns that Mr Rennie is highlighting, increasing the capacity of hospital at home, increasing the capacity within social care services, ensuring that we have call before you convey services for our ambulance service, making sure that we have a whole system response that looks after the individual patient as opposed to the other way around. So there is already significant investment going on, and in terms of oversight of this, we now have a National Social Care Advisory Board, which is ensuring that we're responding to the needs of the social care system, because it is integral to the performance of our health service.
Stephen Kerr.
Enormous disparities between these turnaround times between health boards, and yet what we know is that delayed discharge is endemic across all of the health boards. So why is it that on the assessment of the Cabinet Secretary, why is it that there are some health boards where the turnaround times are significantly less than in others? Are there lessons or practices that are not being shared across the health boards that would improve this situation? Because someone somewhere gets it right and in other places it's not happening.
Cabinet Secretary.
He is absolutely right that the variance that we see of delayed discharge performance between our health and social care partnerships is far too wide. I've said that, and the First Minister has said that on countless occasions, which is why we have a regular meeting of our health and social care partnerships with myself, with the new Minister for Social Care, in order that we can ensure that there is best practice learnt across the system. We are working with our health boards to improve the clinical pathways to ensure that those patients that can be moved through the system quickly are discharged quickly. We don't see the picture that he paints of delayed discharge being endemic across all parts of the system, because there is good performance in some parts of the system. I want to learn from those best performing areas to ensure that we can take those to those areas that are most challenged, and we're providing both the financial and the practical support in order to do just that.
Question number 2, Megan Gallagher.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how many transgender prisoners have had their criminal records erased following a self-identification process and changing of their birth name.
Cabinet Secretary Angela Constance.
Let me be clear, a change of name does not, under any circumstances, alter a person's criminal record. All criminal records are maintained in accordance with established retention and sharing protocols and remain fully accessible to the justice system, including for disclosure in court proceedings where appropriate. Police Scotland has acknowledged an error in one case reported in the media and acknowledges this should not have occurred. I have sought and received assurances from Police Scotland that this was an isolated incident and not reflective of broader issues in their recording practices. I have also asked Police Scotland to ensure that steps will be taken to review systems and procedures in light of the reported case.
Megan Gallagher.
Presiding Officer, this should not have happened in the first place. We're talking about convicted criminals, some of them violent or sexual offenders, whose records could, at any point, be obscured through self-identification and a legal name change. The Cabinet Secretary needs to provide the clarity, and I'm pleased that she has done in her original response today, because we cannot have further instances of this happening in the future. We need to ensure that victims, women's groups and the wider public have faith in the justice system when the government is looking at these issues, because we need to know if there have been instances when authorities have missed a person's criminal record because they've changed their gender. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary on this instance, can she be absolutely sure that this was an isolated instance, and is she sure that we will not be returning back to the Chamber to hear of any more of these instances again in the future?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I thank Ms Gallagher for her question, and as Police Scotland have clearly stated, this should not have happened. And it is crucial to be very clear that a person's gender identity or legal gender status, or indeed their name, does not in any way prevent disclosure of relevant criminal information. And this case, in terms of the information I have received from Police Scotland, was an error in one case. It was a failure to disclose and not a reflection on data recording systems. The information was there on the criminal history record. But I hope I have conveyed in the strongest possible terms the assurances that I have received from Police Scotland on this very important matter.
Megan Gallagher.
Presiding Officer, it's on the point of data that my second question relates to, because campaigners have called for a review of Police Scotland and Crown Office policy following the story that emerged in the press at the weekend. Given that a name change allowed an individual to separate himself from the criminal past, I do believe there needs to be a further investigation into this matter in relation to the processes followed by Police Scotland and the Crown Office, because we shouldn't have had to have waited until this incident took place at its initial stage and being reported in the press. Record keeping is vital, especially in circumstances where an individual changes or can change their name. So will the Cabinet Secretary commit to ending any practices where a criminal can obscure their criminal record via a change of name or gender, and that's to stop convicts from hiding in plain sight before the authorities, and most importantly, safeguarding. What safeguards can the Cabinet Secretary reassure me and the Chamber of today to ensure that records are not misplaced in the system, which, as it stands, may be open to abuse, as we saw in relation to the story that was reported in the press?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, let me be crystal clear. There can be no separation of any individual, irrespective of their gender, irrespective of their sexual identity, irrespective of their name, irrespective of how often someone changes their name. No individual can be separated from their criminal past. And that is because, irrespective of the reason of any name change, knowing someone's identity is absolutely critical. And as has been narrated, this was a failure to disclose. And disclosure responsibilities are crucially important, and this matter was rectified. I have been assured that it's not a reflection on data recording systems, and as is widely understood and has been discussed in this chamber, Police Scotland will be undertaken and are in the process of undertaking a wider review holistically of recording issues in relation to trans people.
Regan.
I don't believe this is a mere administrative error. I believe, and I think I have evidence to support that there is systemic data corruption, which has been driven by years of unlawful self-ID policy. And I also believe the public deserve to know how many criminals have been allowed to reinvent themselves through inaccurate data capture, rewritten or obscured criminal records, which of course disconnects identifying data from offending histories. And data integrity is of course the very foundation of safeguarding, and without it, victims are failed and the public is put at risk. I hear what the Cabinet Secretary has said this afternoon about ordering a review, but can I ask her to go further? Can I ask her to order a full, complete audit of all this data corruption, fix it and finally bring this out into the public realm?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, it is important for the general public who may be listening in that criminal records cannot and are not rewritten or erased on the basis of gender identity. A legal change of name or the possession of a gender recognition certificate does not alter the substance of a criminal record, nor does it prevent the justice system from accessing or disclosing relevant conviction history. The management and updating of criminal records is of course an operational matter for Police Scotland, who are bound by existing law and subject to regular audit and oversight. And where concerns have arisen, as I have done, I have requested clarity from relevant justice partners to ensure that public confidence is upheld.
Tess White.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I note that the Cabinet Secretary uses the word gender and sexual identity. And before my question, I'd just like to say that any legal action brought against the Scottish Prison Service in respect of its policies would be brought against Scottish ministers. So my question, Cabinet Secretary, is have the Scottish Prison Service policies been brought in line with the Supreme Court judgment for Women Scotland Limited versus the Scottish ministers?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, of course, as a Minister, I would never comment on any live proceedings, but I again cannot stress how clear I have been, how clear the Cabinet Secretary for Social Justice has been, and other ministers, that there is a Supreme Court judgment. We are all at pace working through the implications for that for implementation. We, of course, wait the EHRC Code of Practice, which they are currently consulting on, and there is great work the length and breadth of across government to ensure that once we receive further information from the European Commission on Human Rights, that we are ready to implement. So we are in a state of readiness when further information comes our way.
And Sharon Dowie.
Thank you. This is clearly a shambles. We know that dangerous male offenders have gamed the SNP system to serve their sentences in women's prisons, and now they're even getting their criminal records wiped. The chair of the EHRC said the law the Supreme Court ruling sets out is unambiguous, effective immediately, and that those with duties under the Equality Act should be following it. I wrote to Police Scotland and the Scottish Prison Service to demand they comply with the Supreme Court ruling, but the response showed they are still stalling. Given the latest outrage, will ministers now finally intervene, remove all biological men from women's prisons and ensure all public bodies are following the law?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, it is utterly inaccurate and misleading and somewhat disingenuous, if not disgraceful, to suggest that Police Scotland wipe criminal records. Under no circumstances do Police Scotland wipe criminal records, and under no circumstances can anyone, irrespective of their name, status, whether they're male, female, transgender, can they escape from a criminal past? They cannot. And as with regards to the second part of Ms Dowie's question, the Scottish Government right now is making the necessary preparations for implementation.